and the idea that we should be building businesses that are built around humans, but they will use AI. Why wouldn't you use AI? But they should enable humans to be more human than ever before. So I think bringing humans to the forefront, empowering a lot of what we do by AI is the future. And for my children, I'm trying to empower them to have as best communication skills as possible. That doesn't mean it's not at the expense of science. Science is creativity. It's all aspects, but to understand what it is to be human. And I think more businesses should actually have that at the heart of their strategy as an always-on approach. This conformity, this beigeness to so many companies means that they just don't stand out. It doesn't mean they're not successful, but often, they might be in a market that they're successful despite themselves, but it would enable them to be more successful and create value for their customers. I should point out that you can't make people happy. That's something that's really important to know. You can't force people to be happy. So it is about moving towards and having an intention to create an environment where happiness can thrive.
Today our guest is Jaye Cowle, founder of Launch, an award-winning digital advertising agency that describes itself as the happy performance agency. I'm Mark Reeves from PKF Francis Clark, and I'll be your host. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to get updates and notifications on when our latest episodes are available. Hi Jaye, how are you today?
I'm really good. I've got a big mug of coffee and a smile on my face.
Yes, I've seen the cafetiere or whatever the coffee thing is, and it is ginormous.
Even happy people need caffeine.
Oh, that's a new strapline for you now, is it? So talk me through what Launch does.
Launch is the happy performance marketing agency because performance marketing basically helps brands and businesses find their customers online through paid media, Google ads, Facebook ads, Pinterest ads. And then we help people then take them through the customer journey on the website through to conversion with our conversion optimization team and our data and measurement team. So it's kind of the hard end of marketing. It's the end that talks about clicks and impressions and ROAS. And it delivers results, but it's also just one of the many tactics that marketing departments need to deploy.
And well done for getting more acronyms in one sentence than we've had. I think this will set the podcast will set the tone for lots of acronyms, which we will explain, but also mentioning happiness, because that's where you came in. What do you mean by happiness and powered by happiness?
So Launch is over 11 years old now. And one of the things a few years ago as we were coming out of the pandemic that we did was an exercise to understand our purpose, like why we exist beyond just delivering tactics for clients. And what it boiled down to was happiness. We want to create a team that enables people to have a happy atmosphere to work in, that empowers people to bring their best selves to work. Because like I said, we're at the sharp end of marketing. It requires a lot of experimentation, hundreds and hundreds of decisions, micro decisions every single day. And in order to be able to make the best decisions, if you could create psychological safety and an atmosphere where people can, like I said, experiment, but also lean on each other, innovate, have a culture of learning and testing, it enables us to get the best results for the clients. And obviously, happy clients is what all businesses are are trying to create, and that creates happy clients for us.
I like that balance between happy clients and happy staff. Let's come back to that. Let's start where you started. How did you get into the business?
Through a need for flexible working. I was working in London as the head of sales and marketing at a travel company, really enjoyed my job. And then children came along, and it turned out this was, almost 15 years ago now, more than 15 years ago now. And it turned out that the working environment it wasn't possible to have flexible working. This is pre-pandemic. This is, pre-hybrid working from home. And so we moved to Cornwall. Don't even ask why. We had family down there. We almost bought a cheese shop. That's a story for another day. luckily we had a very good accountancy firm who did due diligence, and they told us it was not going to necessarily be the best business idea in the world. But I got a job down there, and I have to say I struggled post maternity leave. Coming out of maternity leave, I went into a very negative working environment, a working environment that didn't try and get people to succeed or bring their best selves to work. So I went freelance, like many people do in the Southwest when they can't find employment opportunities. And from that, I found that marketing is obviously my skill set. Google Ads was one of the quickest ways I could make a difference to a business in a very short period of time with measurable results. And that was the journey that took me to where I am now. And it was Google that actually kind of had a hand on my back and helped me along the way and encouraged me. A couple of years into it, they said you should employ more people like you, and that kind of was the beginning of where we are now.
It's interesting being mentioned that by helped by Google. That's not a common phrase in the marketplace. Google are seen as kind of almost the enemy a little.
Except they're not. They give a platform for, if you think about Google advertising, they give a platform for local roofers, coffee shops, through to Adidas to be able to reach their customers online. And the positive part of being able to put within reach an instantaneous marketing platform to lots of different size, shapes, and businesses. And they do a lot of free stuff for the small businesses. A lot of our past clients were in the SME space. I've done lots of mentoring for clients that might not be able to afford our services, but are able to afford Google. And I think that there are a lot of naysayers, but ultimately they've been able to really amplify SMEs in the UK.
Okay, a slightly interesting take on that. Come back to you moving to Cornwall, slightly odd at that particular moment as a contrast between where you came from. We have talked before on the podcast about the geographic nature of Cornwall and Devon actually encouraging entrepreneurs because there aren't the level of resources that you can rely upon. Was that part of your journey?
I think geography, and I also think any form of adversity. If you think that geography is a bit, it can be an adverse working environment if you're needing to get to see clients that are in the big smoke in London, or that you're trying to employ large numbers of people. There's some adversity there. The pandemic also gave us adversity. Through adversity comes creativity, the ability where you're freed from norms to be able to do something different, with also a feeling of safety that you've got to do something different, because the risk factor, whatever happens, you're not going to be able to succeed unless you do something different. And I think more businesses should actually have that at the heart of their strategy as an always on approach. This conformity, this beigeness to so many companies means that they just don't stand out, and it doesn't mean they're not successful, but often, they might be in a market that they're successful despite themselves, but it would enable them to be more successful and create value for their customers.
That's interesting. I'd refer our listeners back to a podcast we did with Rodders, which started with a 16-year-old getting on a train between the two Great Wars to go to London to sell his mother's clotted cream. And it's from that sort of purpose. There's no other choice. We think this product is really good. We need to get it out to the marketplace. So he gets on a train and goes to London. That's kind of just such a great entrepreneurial beginning, but kind of forced to by the circumstances at that stage. You talk about brands there a little. I know that's where you're really passionate about brands with purpose behind them. And you just given a talk this morning to the team. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, so we are a B Corp. That's a little bit of a shortcut to say that we are a company that believes in purpose, people, environment, community. And one of the opportunities that businesses have is to create value. And that is normally driven by a purpose, why they exist. Our purpose is powered by happiness. That doesn't say anything about the fact that we do performance marketing, but it's the energy and intention with everything that we do to have movement towards happiness. I should point out that you can't make people happy. That's something that's really important to know. You can't force people to be happy. So it is about moving towards and having an intention to create an environment where happiness can thrive. And this morning I was talking to the team about marketing, about going back to the basics of marketing, and the fact that this value creation for customers is super important, because otherwise a business doesn't exist if people aren't willing to part with money in order to buy the value that you are offering. So many businesses, I think, get so far away from that. They're focused on the finances, the HR, the nitty gritty, that they forget why they exist, and that is what purpose is. And if you look at buying trends, certainly with Gen Z in particular, purpose-driven purchasing is much bigger than ever before. And so that is a way for businesses to unlock a little bit of magic in what they're doing.
We've seen that in other guests we've talked to, that phrase, "you're powered by happiness," that just encapsulates so much, but also cuts through. It's not having employees having to memorize the 17 values of the company and all that type of stuff. It is cut through. I'd also balance that, and perhaps we'll come on to the pandemic and the positives from that in a minute, but you're balancing the happiness of the staff and the happiness of the clients at that stage, which I do see the last 2 years, 3 years, has become much more important.
It has. And one of the things that we see an opportunity with is giving, I was going to use the word soft skills, but it's actually hard skills, but educating people of how to increase their confidence, be able to talk through conflict, to be able to increase time management, even the skills of being a human being in order to be able to do their job. So one of the things that we need to do is be able to have difficult conversations with our clients about, because we're talking metrics all the time, I won't mention any more acronyms, but, pay-per-click PPC. It's often, it's very driven by numbers, and those numbers aren't always pointing in the right direction. So our team are able to be better communicators by us doing confidence training, by us empowering them to be able to communicate with the client effectively. Those aren't skills that are taught really in schools. They're skills that if you've got high empathy, you might be good at, but actually high empathy can cause you to then feel guilt if the numbers aren't in the right direction, even if that's things out of your control. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think more business needs to be doing that.
I think it's kind of interesting new set of skills where we've been on the cusp of looking at it for the last decade or so, but coming out of the pandemic, and perhaps a bit for selfish reasons. You've got to get better at recruiting and retaining staff, because it's much more of an employee workforce. So something like that is setting yourself aside, those soft skills, those lunchtime sessions. I suppose it also comes into the mental health side of things, much more open about talking about that at the moment.
There is a great book called by Mary Portas called Work Like a Woman. And her second book in that series is called Rebuild. And it is about creating companies that are designed for humans rather than designed for capitalism. That is resonating with me so much at the moment. If we have all, a short time on this planet, let's all try and do things that make us feel better, that create value, that create impact, positive impact. Because there's another book. It turns out that one of my strengths, I did a strengths assessment the other day, and one of my strengths is a love of learning. I would say that's only come back to me in my 40s over the last 5 years, post kind of children being very small, because I now have a little bit more time and headspace to be able to read. Where I realized that we could make a difference was when I read Dan Pink's book, Drive, which is all about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. How do you motivate a human being? And I'd realized that our marketing agency, I'd become more of a HR person because I was having to motivate the team to deliver positive impact for our clients. Well, I suddenly had to become a psychologist. And that was not an expectation. I didn't go into this world of agency life thinking that that would be the outcome. But it's hugely rewarding because understanding what motivates people beyond money is is wonderful because then you see people thrive. So autonomy is the feeling that you can affect change. You know what your job description is. So many people don't know what their job description is, and it's still a work in progress at launch. As we grow, we're now 30 people. We have to keep evolving it. Mastery is the skills to be able to do the job, and always those improving and feeling like you've got forward momentum with them. And purpose, coming back to that purpose again. Why the hell are we doing it? A lot of people don't know why they're doing their job, to what end, and therefore they normally find their purpose outside of work.
I like the job title side of things within that. There was a podcast guest we had on who had a chief flavorista. They were into food and that side of things. Very important post, but it was made fun. It was that kind of concept of the making sure that they properly understood that it's not a chief finance officer or something like that. It's really cutting through at that moment in time. You talked about almost change of skills within there. In that terms of that entrepreneurial journey, one thing that we do see is people that are really good at starting businesses can reach a ceiling when they stop being able to do everything, when they have to actually delegate and get that level of empathy. They tend to either fall off a cliff or have to sell the business on. You're obviously still growing and adapting your role. What do you think is within you that's allowing you to adapt to that journey?
I think the phrase that's used now is growth mindset. And I have to say, I don't think I always had a growth mindset. I was a bit of a perfectionist at school and in my early years. And in order to not feel like I was out of my comfort zone, I would stay firmly in my comfort zone and be very confident that I was good at what I was doing. That held me back. That stopped me from pursuing hobbies. It stopped me from pursuing new jobs. I don't know when the shift came, perhaps with the move to Cornwall, because you have to be more creative. That also opened me up to meeting lots of different types of businesses. But realizing that you can continually improve until the moment you're no longer conscious is a wonderful freeing feeling. Seeing people going back to doing degrees in their 70s, it's wonderful. And the always learning mentality means that you can make more sense of the world. I learnt early on in my entrepreneurial career about limited growth companies, normally run by a founder. So it's a founder-run organization where the founder can't relinquish any control and also doesn't have really a higher purpose that they're willing to bring other people on a journey with. I was determined to not be that person. And also, I work in an environment where learning and development is hugely important. The Google Ads interface, Meta Ads interface changes every single day. It's constantly evolving. That's exhausting, keeping up with that and running a business. So I also had no choice but to find people better than me to do that so that I basically curate a suite of clients for them to be able to work on where they can do their best work. That's my job now.
That's a good job description of that. We should write that down. One particular phrase was in there was about employing people that are smarter or better than you. That is really brave, especially for entrepreneurs within that. Is there anything specific that you can actually advise that person who might be stuck, who might not want to relinquish control, about going out and getting people that are better than them?
One of the things that comes from a growth mindset is working out who you are, your ego, how you can separate yourself from your ego, how you can do emotional intelligence training, positive intelligence training to enable you to let go of so much. The letting go is the most powerful thing you can do, because then you can become part of an effective team. That doesn't mean you stop being a leader. Being a leader is super important, but it is not being a kind of top down, head over the shoulder, looking at everyone's work point of view. Knowing that there are people who want to succeed and be great at what they're doing, and empowering them to do that is a powerful thing. It doesn't come from me saying I am better or they are better. It just comes from knowing who is meant to be doing what at any one time. Tim Smith from the Eden Project said his superpower was that he was able to find brilliant people and enable them, give them the conditions where they could then thrive and achieve their best work. That's my goal.
I think that's a good definition between leadership and management within that. And that's almost a simple phrase for that, a delimiting factor that you've got to get over the fact you can't do everything. Now, one thing I've got to come to on this, in terms of your development, your growth, you have initially adopted, but then also refined, and I'm going to be very careful with my pronunciation here, a no arsehole policy, which I really like, within limits within that. Do you want to talk about the first adopting and then how you've refined it over the years?
Yes, it's one of those things that kind of cuts through the noise a little bit. It stands out in a sea of corporate beige jargon, and it's something that people pick up a lot. They especially love it when I tell them that at one away day, our company did how to spot an arsehole workshop. And it was about understanding the difference in what behavior is acceptable and what behavior needs to have compassion and empathy shown towards it. One of the things that we've been doing is developing the launch values and purpose that enables us to communicate to a client when our values aren't aligned. A partnership is what a client and an agency relationship is, in the same way as with accountancy and any professional services. It is a partnership. It's where you both have a common goal and you're both playing your part in that partnership to achieve that common goal. And there are instances where the values of launch and the values of our client aren't aligned, and we have to call that out. But we do so now, probably more than ever, with compassion and understanding that you will never fully know what the person at the end of the video call or the end of the angry email, all in caps, is experiencing. So we try not to read tone in. We try not to have a negative reaction to it. We come at it with understanding, but we come at it with confidence of communicating what our values are and asking, are those aligned with your values? Because if they're not, we should probably part ways. And it's a powerful thing, but it's also an extremely delicate thing. But a shortcut is to say that we don't tolerate arseholes.
I like the refinement within that, because I think kindness, you mentioned compassion within there, those are becoming more and more defining principles, especially around Gen Z, that new generation coming through. But it takes me in a slightly different direction, because those are uniquely human qualities. Obviously, one of the key topics at the moment is artificial intelligence, and especially about the new generative stuff that can generate pictures and can generate videos, can write you a campaign in Shakespearean verse, etc. But is kind of failing to deliver, and there's lots of pushback at the moment. What's your view on AI and the future of your market?
It will affect things. It will affect everything that we do. There's no question about that. I look at it from the perspective of my children, who are 15 and 13, and when they go into the workplace, what does the workplace look like for them? I mentioned earlier about Mary Portas's book, and the kindness economy is what she's actually coined a phrase for, and the idea that we should be building businesses that are built around humans, but they will use AI. Why wouldn't you use AI? but they should enable humans to be more human than ever before. I think we've gone through a long period of time where we forgot what it was to be human, and people were just put in positions to do a job, often a job that lasted a lifetime, and they lacked purpose and they often weren't happy, or they had wonderful extracurricular activities that brought them that happiness, but work was a trudge, and the Industrial Revolution. And, you look back to all of that, human beings were kind of forgotten in a majority of that. So I think bringing humans to the forefront, empowering a lot of what we do by AI is the future. And for my children, I'm trying to empower them to have as best communication skills as possible, to have as much access to creativity as possible. That doesn't mean it's not at the expense of science. Science is creativity. It's of all aspects, but to understand what it is to be human.
It's a really good phraseology within there. I see a lot of AI commentary about revolutionizing things and making such a difference, with missing the human element to a certain extent, in that it would be really good if AI could just help me with some basic stuff. Forget the new revolution stuff. It could just help me manage my emails, help me manage my calendar, help me do that type of stuff. I'd pay a lot of money just for the simple stuff. Forget the arty-farty stuff around the top at that moment.
And it's called Microsoft 365, by the way, which is AI is built all into that. Microsoft 365 is powered by AI now, and we have it at our fingertips.
It's getting there, I think, would be my polite expression at that moment. It's still concentrating a little not on some of the basics. Getting really just the basics right is such a good thing within it. I just want to stick with that culture thing, because that's the theme from what we're talking through. We've obviously shifted more towards a hybrid working environment, although there now is a push back. The productivity gurus are really pushing back about presenteeism, must be in the office. How do you see that going? How are you going to manage that for your workforce?
I have two kind of sides, an angel and a devil, if you like, on either side. I abhor presenteeism, but I also know that people normally thrive under structure. The terminology that was used, one of the phrases that was used recently was quiet quitting, which is where you are maybe sitting at your desk, probably not, but not working, but you're showing presenteeism in that instance. I spoke to somebody who worked for a very large insurance company, and I said, how many productive hours do you expect your team to have a day? I think she said a gold standard would be 2 or 3 hours a day, which just blew my mind. I thought as a small business, that would just not be possible for us to exist. And think of the wastage and how much more that person could be doing with their days. That's what absolutely just blows my mind, that people wouldn't want to be engaged in the pursuit of feeling like you're making a difference. Maybe they don't know that that's an option. I'm not sure. But in our instance, we have hybrid working. We were hybrid before the pandemic, so it was a very easy shift to us. That was because we were based in the Southwest and we have to employ for our skill set, which was a rare skill set to have back then, not so much now. So we were always hybrid, but we have quarterly meetups, face-to-face, team building. We have socials in between. Every week we've got, we call them rituals. So we have the opportunity to have a one-to-one with someone you don't normally talk to. We call that a ribbit. You just talk about your hobbies and things you're passionate about. We have a good vibes call on a Friday where people shout out their colleagues and say things that have gone, maybe, things that have gone wrong that they've been able to turn around. So we have lots of these little micro moments, and actually solidifying them into a routine, really, which we call rituals, really, really helps, because it means that on those bad days, you don't forget about those things. And I think if we optimized for the bad days, companies would thrive more.
I like the rituals phraseology there. That brings a lot of colour to it and puts it into that normal part of work. This isn't doing something different. This isn't outside. This is part of the overall role at that moment. I think we're in danger of falling out of some of those. We did quite a few of those with pandemics, but some of those have kind of been put into the background. We're all so busy nowadays. I think that's a really good embedded phrase in there. Earlier you mentioned about good accountancy support, that type of stuff for when you started. How valuable was that to you?
It made a massive, massive difference. I would say that was one of those milestones. You don't realize you're having a milestone while you're in it, but when you look back and reflect, and it's like I said, it's been 11 years now, about halfway through, pre-pandemic, thank goodness, but I think only by a couple of months, we employed an accountancy firm to do proper management accounts for us, a proper P&L, a proper budget. We kept hitting what our assumed kind of number in my head that we got to, money in the bank and overall revenue, but I didn't have the nitty gritty of what some of those, here we go, here's another 3-letter KPIs were. And through having that support, which we paid probably disproportionately for the size of company we were, we overinvested in it in order to accelerate, which absolutely made sense. It educated me, so I learned through the process of it to run a proper P&L and to also what questions to ask. And then when the pandemic hit, we were in a fantastic place because we understood what cash we had in the bank. We understood what our cash flow was going to be. We were able to pull down on all of the non-essential expenses, all at almost the press of a button. Partnership is the word that I used before. And it doesn't matter which, even if you're looking at a web developer, the partners that you have involved in running your business should be treated with kindness and respect and be an extension of your team, because that's where success comes from. And that definitely happened with our accountants, and it happens with our web developers, and that's a great place to be in as a business.
I hear that word partnership more and more nowadays. Okay, last question. Just want to we've got to keep the happiness thing going on this at this stage. What's the happiest piece of work for which you've been engaged?
My memory is often not very long, so I'm going to go for a short-term one. That was a couple of weeks ago. We flew out to Iceland, 7 of the team. We flew out to Iceland on the airline Iceland Air. Has become a client of ours. They are a very forward-thinking challenger brand when you look at Europe and the US, obviously not in Iceland. And their approach to partnership, their approach to marketing, customer service, their place in the market is so forward-thinking. But also, Iceland is an awesome place. We had 3 nights out there. It was absolutely superb, and I highly recommend it for a visit, especially the Sky Lagoon, which was like this amazing kind of hot springs overlooking, like with this infinity pool. It was incredible. I'm just saying it's incredible, but they want us to succeed. We're doing our best work for them, and it is our biggest ever client win, and I'm thrilled.
Well done for getting a client plug in at that moment. Really good. I would second the Iceland thing. Went out there. I managed to see the Northern Lights whilst we were out there, and it is fantastic. Although obviously at the moment having slight issues with volcanoes and lava.
So the team took off as the volcano was exploding nearby. But it's a volcanic island. There's many volcanoes. It's just everyday business for them. And one of my teammates, who's also a photographer in his spare time, took the most incredible pictures and video from the aeroplane window as they flew over the magma and the lava. My son's geography teacher was very excited when I sent her the video.
Well, that's a brilliant note to end on. So thank you, Jay, so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I know our listeners will enjoy it too. And I think it's really fascinating to discuss that concept of the kindness economy, the happiness factors, which will be so much more important as we go forward.
100%. Thank you, Mark.
And thank you to our audience for listening to our latest episode of Business Noodles. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation. As I said earlier, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to get updates and notifications on when our latest episodes are available.